Hello, so for my nonfiction book review, I did The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank, and it was edited by her father, Otto Frank. Anne Frank was born in Frankfurt in Weimar, Germany on June 12, 1929. She spent most of her life in Amsterdam after her family moved there in 1933 when the Nazis gained control of Germany. Her family went into hiding in 1942 to avoid being taken away to the concentration camps and suffering Hitler's wrath. Otto Frank, Anne's father, was the only survivor in the family and decided to fulfill Anne's dream and publish an edited version of her diary. He later decided to release an unedited version, which wasn't touched at all and has every one of Anne's thoughts included. The book that I will be telling you about today is the edited version that Otto first released. I chose this book because I think it's important that everyone knows about this time in history, and reading it through a victim's perspective makes it seem much more realistic, and the readers will really understand what a terrible time this was and how hard it was on the Jews. So, a brief summary of this book. On June 12th, 1942, Anne Frank received a diary for her 13th birthday. This diary became one of the most important pieces of literature that came from the Holocaust. It gives an insider's perspective of what life for Jewish people was like during Hitler's rule. The diary starts out as just as a friend because Anne feels like she does not have a friend close enough for her to confide in. But it eventually turns into a documentary of her life as a Jew and her life in hiding. Anne and her family are forced into hiding in 1942 when it became clear that they would soon be sent to concentration camps if they didn't go into hiding. The Frank family and several others hid in the secret annex, which was an apartment type thing, hidden behind a bookcase in the office that Otto Frank, Anne's father, worked in. The group was later betrayed by an anonymous person and sent to concentration camps. Anne and her older sister Margit were both sent to Auschwitz, and later on they were sent to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, where they both eventually died in early 1945. When Otto Frank, the sole survivor of the family, returned to their home during hiding in Amsterdam, he found that one of the family's helpers had saved Anne's diary, and he edited it and published it in 1947. Here are 7 interesting things about my topic. Anne Frank never intended for her diary to be read by anyone except for her until she heard a radio broadcast in 1944 by Gerrit Bolkestein, a member of the Dutch government. He announced that after the war he wanted to collect eyewitness accounts of the suffering of the Dutch people under the German occupation, which could be made available to the public. He specifically mentioned letters and diaries, and that's when Anne Frank. After hearing Bolkestein's broadcast, Anne decided she would publish a book based on her diary when the war was over. When Otto Frank returned to the secret annex after the war was over, he found Anne's diaries, and once it was known for sure that Anne had died, he decided to fulfill her wish and to publish her diary. I had always thought that her diary was exactly what she wrote, no edits or anything, until I read the foreword where it states about Otto Frank that in making his choice, Otto Frank had to bear several points in mind. To begin with, the book had to be kept short so that it would fit in with the series put out by the Dutch publisher. In addition, several passages dealing with Anne's sexuality were omitted. At the time of the diary's initial publication in 1947, it was not customary to write openly about sex, and certainly not in books for young adults. Out of respect for the dead, Otto Frank also omitted a number of unflattering passages about his wife and other residents of the secret annex. Anne Frank, who was 13 when she began her diary and 15 when she was forced to stop, wrote without reserve about her likes and dislikes. And then on page 6, which is really early on into her diary, she states, "Writing in a diary is a really strange experience for someone like me. Not only because I've never written anything before, but also because it seems to me that later on, neither I nor anyone else will be interested in the musings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl. Oh well, it doesn't matter. I feel like writing, and I have an even greater need to get all kinds of things off my chest." Which I thought was interesting because she never intended for her diary to be read by anyone, just by her. And it turned into a super big, amazing book. And then I always knew that the restrictions on what the Jewish people could and couldn't do was extreme, but I didn't realize how detailed and specific the restrictions were until I read this passage on page 8. It says, "Our freedom was severely restricted by a series of anti-Jewish decrees. Jews were required to wear a yellow star, Jews were required to turn in their bicycles, Jews were forbidden to use streetcars, Jews were forbidden to ride in cars, even their own, Jews were required to do their shopping between 3 and 5 p.m., Jews were required to frequent only Jewish-owned barbershops and beauty parlors, Jews were forbidden to be out on the streets between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m., Jews were forbidden to go to theaters, movies, or any other forms of entertainment. Jews were forbidden to use swimming pools, tennis courts, hockey fields, or any other athletic fields. Jews were forbidden to go rowing. Jews were forbidden to take part in any athletic activity in public. Jews were forbidden to sit in their gardens or those of their friends after 8 p.m. Jews were forbidden to visit Christians in their homes. Jews were required to attend Jewish schools, etc. You couldn't do this and you couldn't do that, but life went on." After reading the afterword, I found out that Anne Frank didn't die by being gassed. Up until now, I just assumed that she had died by being gassed to death, but she actually died of typhus in late February or early March. There was a typhus outbreak, and her sister got typhus first, and then she got typhus from her sister. The concentration camp that Anne was at was liberated only 1 or 2 months after Anne had died, which was really sad to me because if she didn't get sick, or if she got sick later, or if the camp was liberated a little bit earlier, she very likely would have lived, and we would have had a little bit more insight. I also did not know that any of the other family members had survived before reading this book, but Otto Frank, Anne's father, was the sole survivor of the family and also the sole survivor of the group that was hiding in the secret annex. This book was very accurate because it's the real diary of a Jewish girl during the Holocaust. Everything in this book was a diary entry from 1942 when the Nazis were sending all the Jews to concentration camps until she was taken away by the Nazis. The content of this book is very simple. There is a short foreword, the diary, and then a short afterword. The foreword and the afterword are very important to the book because in the beginning you need a little introduction because of the topic, and the afterword is important because it tells you what happened to the family and the others who were in hiding. The style of this book is very different from other books, and since they are diary entries, that's what makes it different, and it really puts you in Anne Frank's shoes rather than just feeling like an outsider looking in while reading other books. This book was very organized. The fact that it's written in passages is what I think really makes it organized. I believe that it's a much easier read when written as diary entries rather than it would be written as a novel. And this book doesn't have any illustrations, so I can't evaluate it on that, but I enjoyed the format of the book. The format is what really makes the book enjoyable. Again, the fact that it is written as a diary entry makes it a lot more interesting to read, in my opinion. The text, how it enhanced my understanding of the topic, it really makes you understand what it must have felt like to be in Anne's shoes or any Jewish person's shoes during this time period. It shows the reader more about what the Jews weren't allowed to do and provides an extremely clear picture of what it would be like to be in hiding. This book would be great for 8th graders or 13 and 14-year-olds because kids much younger than that might not be able to grasp the whole concept of what Hitler did and why he did it. I also think that this is a good age for children to read this book because that's the age that Anne was at when she started writing this diary. It'll be easier for the students to connect to and to relate to Anne more than they would be able to if they were much younger or much older than Anne Frank was at the time she started writing. I would definitely recommend this book, like highly, highly recommend it. I believe that it's a great book and that everyone should read it at some point in their life. Reading the actual diary entries from a 13-year-old Jewish girl during the Holocaust makes it feel extremely real, and it makes you feel like as you're reading you can relate with her, and it just feels, again, so real, and it's really a great book. If you haven't read it, you should read it.